The truth is a funny thing. It doesn't vanish, not really. It just gets buried under layers of other people's convenience. 4 years. They'd been shoveling dirt on my truth, patting it down with pitying smiles and patient, condescending tones. And I just stood there, letting them. Or so they thought. They called it confusion, a fuzzy memory, senior moments. I started calling it the fog. It was their invention, not mine. But I learned to breathe it in, to let it cling to me, until I became a harmless, half-seen silhouette within it. It was my camouflage. It all started, as these things often do, with money. A simple thing, really. I'd given my granddaughter, Chloe, a check for her birthday. $500. She was saving for a car, a little rust bucket of her dreams. And I wanted to help. A week later, my son, David, was sitting at my kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a mug of coffee he hadn't touched. "Dad, we need to talk about the check to Chloe." I was loading the dishwasher. "What about it? She cash it." "She did," he said, his voice that particular brand of gentle that sets my teeth on edge. It's the voice you use on a spooked animal or a simpleton. "Dad, the check was for $50, not $500. I stopped, a plate in my hand. "No, it wasn't. I wrote it out myself. $500. He gave me a sad, knowing smile. "You wrote 50. Look, it's okay. These things happen." Mom's handwriting was always so precise, but it's harder as we get older. The eyes play tricks. The hand doesn't always listen. He always brought up Ella, my late wife, in these conversations. A low blow, even for him, using her memory to sandbag me. "David, I know the difference between 50 and 500. I've been writing checks longer than you've been alive. I know you think you do," he said, leaning forward. "But it's just not what happened." Chloe was a little disappointed, but she understands. We all understand. I remember the feeling then. It wasn't anger, not at first. It was a cold, sinking sensation in my gut, like he'd swallowed a key to a lock that no longer existed. I was sure, absolutely, bone-deep sure. But his certainty was a solid wall. My wife, Sarah, his second a sleek, sharp-nosed woman who had taken me on as her personal project after Eleanor Pash chimed in from the doorway. I hadn't even heard her come in. "Barry, darling, it's nothing to be embarrassed about," she purred. "We're just looking out for you." David's spoken to Dr. Evans. He says minor confabulation is perfectly normal. You remember something the way you wish it had been, not the way it was. It's the mind's way of protecting itself. Confabulation. A $10 word for you're making things up, old man. I looked from David's pitying face to Sarah's smug, concerned one. Arguing was a trap. Protesting would only be more proof of my declining state. So I did the only thing I could. I let my shoulders slump. I looked down at the plate in my hand, as if I'd forgotten what it was for. I leaned into the fog. "Did I?" I murmured, my voice raspy. I could have sworn 500 for a car. It made sense. David's posture relaxed immediately. Crisis averted. The confused old man was back in his box. "It's okay, Dad. Really. We've got it handled. Maybe from now on. Just let me know when you want to give the kids money. I can write the checks for you. Make it easier." And just like that, the first thread of financial control was pulled. That was 3 years ago. The fog thickened after that. A missing $200 from my wallet became me misplacing it. A discussion about reinvesting ACD became proof I couldn't grasp basic financial concepts. Sarah took over the bill paying, citing my stress over the paperwork. David began helping with my investment portfolio, moving things around, consolidating, simplifying things for you, Dad. My other son, Mark, a quieter, more anxious man who always followed David's lead, would just nod along. Whatever's easiest, Pop. My daughter, Linda, lived across the country. Our weekly calls became minefields. "How are you, Dad?" "Really?" she'd ask, and I could hear the whirring, fed by David's reports. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Right as rain." David says, "You've been forgetting your pills again, and that you tried to pay the gardener with a $100 bill thinking it was a 10. I'd close my eyes. I'd never done any such thing. The gardener was paid by direct deposit, set up by Sarah. But the story was already told, already believed. The fog was seeping through the phone lines. All the way to California, I felt myself disappearing. I was becoming the story they were telling about me. The forgetful, confused, financially incompetent burden. And the truly maddening part was the love. It was all wrapped in this suffocating blanket of concern. They loved me. They cared. They were protecting me. It was the perfect gaslight. Who suspects a trap that's baited with kindness? The turning point came on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were Sarah's day to tidy up my office, my sanctum, the one room in the house that was still mine, with Eleanor's old reading chair and my books and the framed photos of a life lived long before or any of them were in it. I'd come in to find her at my desk, not tidying, but going through the files in the bottom drawer, the important ones, the deeds, the old stock certificates, the paperwork for the patents he'd licensed back in the 70s that still provided a quiet, steady stream of income they knew nothing about. "What are you doing, Sarah?" She jumped, a flash of genuine guilt quickly masked by irritation. "Barry, you startled me. I'm just organizing, for heaven's sake. This is all a dreadful mess. You can't possibly find anything in here." She held up a folder. "What are these?" "Those are mine," I said, my voice harder than it intended. She blinked, then her expression softened into that infuriating patronizing look. "Of course they are, dear. I'm just trying to help. You can't be bothered with this tedious stuff. It's distressful for you. Why don't you go and watch your game show? I'll have a nice cup of tea for you when I'm done." She shooed me away, literally shooed me, flicking her fingers at me as if I were a fly. I stood there for a moment, truly seeing it. This wasn't care. This was a coup in progress. A soft, gentle, legal coup of my own life. I went to the living room, but I didn't turn on the TV. I sat in my armchair, the one that had been mine for 40 years, and I looked out at the garden Eleanor had planted. I thought about the man I used to be. Barry the engineer. Barry who built things. Barry who solved problems. That man wasn't gone. Had just been waiting in the quiet, watching the schematics of his own demise being drawn up right in front of him. And that's when the idea came. Not a loud, angry idea. A quiet, precise, engineering solution. If the problem was their word against mine, their reality against my confusion, then I needed evidence. Irrefutable, objective data. I needed to document the fog from the inside. The next day, I told Sarah was feeling a bit peckish and fancied a pasty from the bakery in town. It was a 15-minute drive. She looked reluctant. I hadn't driven much lately. Another freedom gently revoked for my own good, but she relented. "Don't dally, Barry, and take your phone." I didn't go to the bakery. I drove to a drab, anonymous electronics store in a strip mall 20 miles away, a place no one who knew me would ever frequent. I walked in, an old man in a tweed cap, and I asked the pimply kid behind the counter for their selection of voice-activated recorders. He showed me tiny things, like something out of a spy movie. Button cameras, pens that recorded, USB chargers with built-in mix. One chose a few. A sleek, modern alarm clock from my bedside table. A pack of pens that wrote perfectly well, that captured every sound. A key fob that could record 8 hours straight. I paid in cash. The kid didn't bat an eye. On the way home, I stopped at the bakery. I bought 2 pasties. One for me, and one for Sarah. A peace offering. A prop. Planting the devices was my first engineering project in years. It required planning. The clock was easy. The pen went into the mug on my desk. Always there, always ready. The key fob lived in my pocket. Its button warmed smooth by my thumb. I became a maestro of casual conversation, learning to gently steer talks toward money, the past, promises made and remembered. It feigned confusion, then let them correct me, their voices dripping with patient certainty, all captured in crystal clear digital audio. The recordings were a revelation. Hearing it back, divorced from the moment, was like viewing a bacteria culture under a microscope. The subtle manipulations were laid bare. The exchanged glances I couldn't see were replaced by telling pauses and whispered asides my ears had missed. I was in the garden, pretending to weed Eleanor's rose bushes. the key fob recorder in my breast pocket. David and Sarah were on the patio, thinking I was out of earshot. "Can't just move it all at once," Sarah was saying, her voice a low, urgent hiss. "It needs to look organic. The power of attorney first. Then we can start shifting the assets into the trust for the kids." "I'll never agree to a power of attorney," David replied, his voice tense. "You know how stubborn he is. He'll agree if his doctor tells him to." "Dr. Evans will do it. I've spoken to him. He understands the situation. The forgetfulness, the confusion with finances. It's for Barry's own protection." "Is it, Sarah? It feels like what? Necessary." "It is. He's deteriorating fast, David. What if he wires all his money to some television evangelist or one of those romance scammers? It happens every day. We're not stealing from him. We're preserving his estate. For your children. For Chloe and Jake. It's what he'd want if he were in his right mind." The coldness of it, the sheer calculated venality, made my hands shake. I stabbed at the dirt with my trowel, the metal biting into the earth. They weren't just nudging me into a corner, they were designing a whole new prison for me, with Dr. Evans as the kindly warden and my own family as the guards. That night, I lay in bed, the red eye of the alarm clock recorder blinking silently in the dark. Eleanor's photo was on the bedside table. She'd have known what to do. She was always the strategist, the fierce protector of her family. She'd have eviscerated David with a look and sent Sarah packing with a few well-chosen words that would sting for a decade. But she wasn't here. It was just me, and the fog, and the tiny digital devices holding my truth. I couldn't just expose them with the recordings. Not yet. It would be a messy, ugly fight. They'd claim he'd doctored them, that it was the paranoia of a declining mind. They had Dr. Evans in their pocket. They had the narrative. I needed a final, unassailable move, a checkmate. I needed a new will. My current will was old, written when Eleanor was still alive. It left the bulk of my estate to David and Mark, with trusts for the grandchildren. It was fair. It was what we'd wanted. Now, it was a document that would reward treachery. I couldn't just go to my old lawyer, Henderson. He was a friend of David's. The whole town was. I was the forgetful old Barry. They'd all believe David if he expressed concerns about my mental state. So, I engineered another trip. A doctor's appointment for a checkup I didn't have. Sarah offered to drive me. I declined, saying I needed the independence, the practice. She relented, though I saw the suspicion in her eyes. I drove to the city, 60 miles away, to a firm I'd found online, Hartley and Smither, estate law. A big, impersonal, glass and steel firm. They had no history with me, no loyalty to my family. My meeting was with a young woman, Ms. Esme Wright. She was probably 30, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She greeted me in a minimalist conference room. "Mr. Bernstein, what can we help you with today?" I placed my old will on the table. Then I placed a digital voice recorder next to it. I pressed play. For the next 20 minutes, Esme Wright listened. She listened to David and Sarah discussing the power of attorney. She listened to them planning the trust. She listened to Sarah's hissed urgings and David's reluctant compliance. She didn't interrupt. Her face, professionally neutral, grew increasingly still. When it finished, I spoke. My voice was steady. The fog was gone. It was just me, Barry the engineer, presenting the data. "I have over 70 hours of similar conversations," I said. "I am of sound mind. I am not confused. I am being systematically manipulated by my family in order to gain control of my finances. I need to create a new, ironclad last will and testament, one that cannot be challenged on the grounds of mental incompetence, and I need to create a video affidavit to accompany it, establishing my testamentary capacity beyond any doubt." Miss Wright was silent for a long moment. She looked at me, really looked at me, not as an old man, but as a client, a strategist. "Mr. Bernstein," she said finally, "that is an extraordinary piece of evidence." "It's just data," I said. "Now, let's build something with it." We worked 4 weeks. Secret trips to the city, Drafts of the will sent to a secure post office box he'd rented. Esme was brilliant, thorough, and fiercely discreet. The new will was a masterpiece. It left my house and a small, token sum to David, in recognition of a son's expected duty, however poorly executed. It left a similar amount to Mark, for his complacency. It left Sarah nothing but $1, so it cannot be said she was forgotten. The bulk of the estate, the patents, the investments, the life insurance, everything was divided into trusts for my grandchildren, Chloe and Jake, and my daughter, Linda, to be administered by a corporate trustee, not a family member. They wouldn't get a penny until they were 30, with stipulations for education and first homes. It was fair, it was just, and it was a bomb. But the key was the video. Esme arranged for a videographer to come to the office. She prepared a series of questions designed to prove my mental state. Who is the current president? What year is it? Who are your children? But she also had me explain, in my own words, the contents of my estate, the value of my patents, the nature of my investments. I spoke clearly, precisely, detailing financial instruments and legal structures with the clarity you used my whole professional life. Then, she asked the final question, Mr. Bernstein, why have you decided to make these specific bequests in your new will? I looked directly into the camera. I felt a strange calm. This was my testimony, my truth, finally given a voice. 4 years, I began, my voice low but clear. My family has perpetuated a fiction about my mental decline. They have told me I am forgetful, that I am confused, that I cannot be trusted with my own affairs. I have allowed them to believe this. I have feigned confusion. I have hidden my capabilities behind a facade of frailty they were all too eager to accept. I leaned forward slightly, my hands flat on the table. I did this to gather evidence, to protect myself from their avarice disguised as concern. The recordings you have heard are a sample of that evidence. They have discussed moving my assets, obtaining power of attorney against my will, and manipulating my doctor, all under the false and self-serving premise that I am not in my right mind. I took a breath, my gaze unwavering from the lens. This will is not the product of a confused or failing brain. It is the deliberate, rational, and calculated act of a man of sound mind who has been forced to defend himself from his own family. It is a map of their betrayal. Every disinheritance, every reduced bequest, is a direct consequence of their own actions and words, now preserved for posterity. They designed this outcome. I am merely the instrument of its delivery. There was more, much more. We went through every clause, every decision. I explained it all. By the end, I was tired, but exhilarated. The fog was gone, burned away by the bright lights of the video studio. The documents were signed, witnessed, notarized. The video was copied and stored in multiple secure locations, both physical and digital. Hartley and Smith retained the originals. I had copies, hidden in places Sarah would never think to look, tucked inside the hollowed-out pages of her old engineering textbook, sealed in a waterproof case, buried deep in the compost pile where Eleanor grew her prize-winning tomatoes. I returned home. The fog settled back around me. I was forgetful Barry again. I missed a pill dose on purpose. I asked Sarah twice what day it was. I let her take my credit card for safekeeping. The performance was easier now, because it was a performance. I knew the third act was coming. The trigger came a month later. Dr. Evans called me into his office for a chat. Sarah drove me, of course. She sat in the waiting room, smiling brightly. Just a check-in, darling. Nothing to worry about, Doctor. Evans was a kindly man in his 60s, with a tired face. Barry, how are we doing? Can't complain, Doc, I said, my voice purposely vague. Bit tired. Sarah tells me you've been having more trouble lately, forgetting to eat, getting upset about money. I just nodded, looking at my hands. She and David are very worried. They're concerned about you being alone, managing your finances. It's a lot of stress. They've brought me some papers, adorable power of attorney. It would let David help you. Take that burden off your shoulders. He slid the papers across the desk. I looked at them but didn't touch them. The fog was so thick in here I could barely see. It's for the best, Barry, he said gently, we all want what's best for you. I had a pen recorder in my shirt pocket. It was all getting it. Every word. I looked up at him, letting my eyes go a little watery. Is it time? I think it is, Barry. I really do. It's a good thing. It shows how much your family loves you. I nodded slowly, as if absorbing a difficult truth. Okay, I whispered. If you think so, I do. I'll just need you to sign here. He pointed to the line. I picked up the pen he offered, not my recorder pen. A cheap BIC. My hand shook, a tremor he'd been practicing. I made a clumsy, scrawling signature. It wasn't my own. It was a messy approximation. Dr. Evans didn't seem to notice. He smiled, relieved. There now. That wasn't so hard, was it? Sarah will be so pleased. He walked me out. Sarah stood up, her face a mask of concern. Everything all right? Everything's fine, Doctor, Evans said, giving her a significant look. Barry was very understanding. Her smile was triumphant. She linked her arm through mine. Let's get you home, darling. That night, the family gathered. David, Sarah, Mark, even Chloe and Jake were there. It was a celebration. A quiet, somber one, but a celebration nonetheless. They ordered my favorite Chinese food. They were unusually kind, unusually attentive. I played my part, smiling vaguely, thanking them for the egg roll. David finally broached the subject. Dad, Dr. Evans called. He said, you were a real champ today. I looked at him, pretending to search my memory. At the doctor's. Yes, Dad. You signed the papers that let me help you with your money, so you don't have to worry anymore. I let a look of dawning comprehension cross my face, followed by fear. I assigned something. It's okay, Sarah said quickly, patting my hand. It's all done. It's for the best. But my money, my house, it's all safe, David said, his voice firm, final. I'm handling it now. You don't need to trouble yourself. I looked around the table, at Mark, who was studying his plate, at Chloe and Jake, who looked uncomfortable but trusting of their parents, at Sarah, victorious, at David, the new king. I leaned back in my chair. The performance was over. No, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a shard of glass. Everyone stopped. The room went silent. What was that, Dad? David asked, a patronizing smile playing on his lips. I said, no, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The years of false frailty fell away. My back straightened. My eyes, which he'd kept soft and unfocused, now focused on him with a clarity that made his smile vanish. You are not handling my money. You never were. Sarah laughed, a nervous, tinkling sound. Barry, darling, you're confused. You signed the papers. The doctor witnessed it. I signed a meaningless scribble, I said calmly. And Dr. Evans witnessed what he wanted to see, what you primed him to see. David's face darkened. Dad, don't do this. Don't get upset. You know how these episodes wear you out. Episodes, I repeated. Yes. Let's talk about episodes. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan and pulled out the small, black key fob. I placed it on the table between the sweet and sour sauce and the plate of spring rolls. What's that? Mark asked, finally speaking. It's a recorder, I said. I've been using it, and others like it, for months. The color drained from Sarah's face. David's jaw tightened. That's illegal. You can't record people without their consent. This is a one-party consent state, I said. I was a party to every conversation. It's perfectly legal. Unlike conspiracy to defraud an elderly person, unlike attempting to coerce a signature under false pretenses, you're paranoid. Sarah spat, her mask of kindness finally slipping. This is exactly what we were afraid of. Delusions. Is it a delusion, Sarah? I asked, my voice still terrifyingly calm. When you said to David, and I quote, he'll agree if his doctor tells him to. Dr. Evans will do it. I've spoken to him. Or when you discussed moving my assets into a trust for the kids, so it looks organic. Her face was a white sheet of shock. David stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Stop it. Stop it right now. You don't know what you're saying. This is your confusion talking. Sit down, David, I said. It wasn't a request. It was an order, the kind I hadn't given him since he was a boy. He hesitated, then slowly sank back into his chair. I have documented everything, I continued, my gaze sweeping around the table, meeting each of their horrified stares. Your lies, your manipulations, your plans for my money. I have hours of it. It's all been digitized. It's all safe. And it has all been given to my lawyer. Your lawyer, David whispered. Henderson. He'll see right through this insanity. Not Henderson, I said. A new firm. In the city. Hartley and Smither. They specialize in estate law. And they have everything. The recordings. And my new last will and testament. And the video. The word was a gasp from Sarah. A video affidavit, I said. Recorded 3 weeks ago. In which I, Barry Bernstein, in full possession of my mental faculties, detail my entire estate, explain the contents of my new will, and state, for the record, my lucid and rational reasons for disinheriting almost all of you. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Chloe had her hand over her mouth. Jake was staring at his father as if he'd never seen him before. You can't, David stammered, his world crumbling. I already have, I said. The will you tricked me into signing today is worthless. The power of attorney is null and void. The old will is revoked. The new one is ironclad. It has been reviewed by 2 separate psychiatrists, independent ones, not Dr. Evans, who both interviewed me and confirmed my testamentary capacity beyond any shadow of a doubt. Their reports are appended to the will. I picked up my teacup and took a sip. It was still warm. This is monstrous, Sarah finally whispered, her voice trembling with real fury now. After all we've done for you, we cared for you, we looked after you. You tried to steal from me. I corrected her, my voice cold. You used my love for my family as a weapon. You treated my home, my life, my mind, as something to be managed and then plundered. You gaslit an old man. You thought the fog would hide you, but I was never in the fog. I was just waiting for you to walk deep enough into it that you couldn't find your way out. I stood up. I didn't feel 81 years old. I felt every one of my years, but as strength, not weakness. The weight of a life lived. The Chinese food was good, I said. Thank you for that. Now, I think you should all leave. They left. There were no more arguments. No more protests. They were defeated by the one thing they never thought I had left. My mind. The evidence was too overwhelming. The trap it built, piece by piece, recording by recording, had sprung perfectly. David was the last to go. He stood in the doorway, looking at me not with anger, but with a dazed, shattered confusion. The gaslighter, finally gaslit by his own fiction. Why, Dad? He asked, his voice broken. Why go to such extremes? Why didn't you just talk to me? I looked at my son, my firstborn. I saw the little boy who used to ride on my shoulders, and I felt a pain so profound it almost buckled my knees. Almost. I tried, David, I said softly. That day with Chloe's check, you didn't listen. You had already decided who I was, so I had to become someone else to prove you wrong. Now get out of my house. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. The silence that followed was immense. It was the silence of a battlefield after the war. I was alone. I had won. I had preserved my legacy, my truth, myself. I walked to the patio door and looked out at Eleanor's garden. The roses were blooming. I could almost feel her there beside me. I thought she'd be proud of the engineer, proud of the solution ID built. But as I stood there in the quiet, victorious and utterly alone, I wondered if the price of winning had been the last remaining fragments of the family I'd once hoped I was protecting. The fog had lifted, but the view it revealed was desolate and beautiful and mine alone. The silence after the door clicked shut was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It wasn't just an absence of noise, it was a presence. A vast, echoing chamber of consequences. I stood in the center of my living room, surrounded by the detritus of our failed family dinner, half-empty containers of lo mein, greasy paper plates, the faint, sweet and sour scent of betrayal hanging in the air. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, runaway drumbeat. Adrenaline, the kind I hadn't felt since troubleshooting a blown reactor control panel under a deadline 40 years ago, sang in my veins. I was trembling, a fine, pervasive shake that started deep in my bones and worked its way out to my fingertips. I gripped the back of my armchair, Eleanor's chair, to steady myself. The worn velvet under my hand was anchor to reality. I had done it. I had actually done it. The plan, which had lived for so long as a cold, precise schematic in my mind, was now executed. The blueprints were reality. The reverse gaslight was complete. The euphoria of victory was immediately followed by a wave of nauseating emptiness. I looked around. The house, my home for over 50 years, felt alien. The walls seemed to lean in, witnesses to the ugly truth I had just unleashed. The photographs on the mantelpiece, David's graduation, Mark's wedding, all of us smiling on some long-ago beach vacation, now seemed like exhibits in a case study of familial decay. Were those smiles ever real? Or were they just early rehearsals for the performance that had finally concluded tonight? I moved on autopilot, clearing the table. My hands, still shaking, stacked the containers. I scraped and eaten rice into the disposal. Each clatter of a plate, each crinkle of wax paper, was a stark punctuation in the overwhelming silence. I was avoiding the inevitable. The confrontation was over, but the war was just beginning. I knew them. Sarah's pride was a festering wound now. David's sense of entitlement, so thoroughly punctured, would not deflate quietly. They would regroup. They would lawyer up. They would fight. The thought was exhausting. I was so tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. It was a soul-deep weariness from years of playing a part, of swallowing my truth, of carefully, meticulously building a case against the people was supposed to be able to trust most. I ended up in my office, the command center of my long operation. I sank into my desk chair, the old leather sighing under my weight. The mug of pens sat where it always did. One of them, the black one with the silver clip, was my sentinel. It had heard everything. I powered on my ancient desktop computer, the one they all thought I only used for solitaire and getting confused by email. It was slow, but it was secure, never connected to the Wi-Fi network Sarah controlled. It was for one thing only, storing the truth. I plugged in the key fob recorder. The file transfer was agonizingly slow. While I waited, I opened the bottom desk drawer, the one Sarah had been rifling through. I felt for the hidden catch Eleanor, and I had installed decades ago to store her good jewelry. A quiet click, and a small panel slid open. Inside were the copies Esme Wright had given me, the new will, the psychiatrist's reports, and a DVD copy of the video affidavit. I ran my fingers over the cool, smooth surface of the disc. My own face stared back from the label, a headshot Esme had insisted on. I looked stern, clear-eyed, resolute. I looked like me. The file finished transferring. I copied it to two separate encrypted USB drives. One went back into the hidden compartment. The other I would mail to Linda in the morning, using the PO box. She needed to know. She needed to be prepared for the tsunami of angry phone calls that were undoubtedly coming her way. It was then that my phone buzzed. Not the landline, which would probably ring off the hook soon, but my cell phone. A text message. I picked it up, expecting a novel of fury from David or a masterpiece of manipulative guilt from Sarah. It was from Chloe. "Grandpa, are you okay?" 3 little words and a question mark. They undid me. The stern, victorious facade I'd been holding on to crumbled. Tears, hot and sudden, welled in my eyes. Of all of them, Chloe and Jake were the innocents in this. Collateral damage in their parents' war of greed. Chloe was 19, smart, kind, with her grandmother's curious eyes. She had always been my favorite. My first instinct was to protect her, to tell her I was fine, that everything was fine, to go back to the simple world where her grandfather was just a kindly, slightly confused old man. But that was the old way, the fog way. She had been in the room. She had heard the recordings. She had seen the shattered look on her father's face. She deserved more than a pat answer. My gnarled thumbs, clumsy on the touchscreen, typed back, "I am okay, sweetheart. I am sorry you had to see that. It was not meant for you." The 3 dots appeared immediately, pulsing. She was waiting, phone in hand. "I don't understand. Dad and Sarah, they said you were sick. They said we had to help you." Of course they did. They'd woven their narrative for everyone, pulling the threads tight. "I am not sick," I typed, each word feeling like a boulder I had to push uphill. "I've been playing a part to protect myself." The recording's what you heard, that was the truth. A long pause. Then, "It sounded like them. It really did. But why would they do that? How do you explain systemic, calculated avarice to a young woman who still believes in the fundamental goodness of her family?" People change, Chloe. Money changes people. It doesn't excuse it. "I am so sorry. Are we losing the house? Jake is really scared." There it was. The practical fear cutting through the emotional shock. David and Sarah had likely already spun a tale of my irrationality, of me throwing away their inheritance on a whim, being manipulated by some imaginary third party. "No one is losing anything they are entitled to," I wrote, choosing my words with the precision of a surgeon. "The new will provides for you and Jake. It provides for your Aunt Linda. It is fair. It is what your grandmother would have wanted. Your father and Sarah, their actions have had consequences. That is all." I could feel her confusion through the phone. The foundation of her world was cracking. "I have to go. Dad is calling for me. He's really upset. I know. Be kind to him, Chloe. But be true to yourself. I love you. Love you too, Grandpa." The conversation ended, leaving a new, different kind of silence in its wake. It was no longer just my silence. It was now a chasm of silence between all of us, and I felt the weight of it settle on my shoulders. I had wanted to protect them, the grandchildren, from the ugliness, but the ugliness had been there all along, festering in their own home, spoken in hushed tones over dinner tables I wasn't at. By exposing it, I had forced them to look at it. Was that a kindness or a cruelty? I didn't know any more. The landline rang, shrill and demanding. I let it go to the answering machine. After the beep, David's voice filled the room, tight with a fury he was barely containing. "Dad, pick up. We need to talk. This isn't over. You can't just do this. Those recordings are taken out of context. You're confused. We need to sit down with Dr. Evans and sort this out. Call me back." Click. The message ended. The context argument. It expected it. It was the last refuge of the gaslighter. "You're misremembering. You're taking it the wrong way." If you heard the whole conversation, but they weren't snippets, they were long, unedited conversations. The context only made them worse. The phone rang again 10 minutes later. This time, it was Sarah. Her voice was different, not angry, wounded, saccharine. The concerned wife. "Barry, my love, oh, Barry. I'm so heartbroken. What has gotten into you? This isn't you. This paranoia, these silly spy gadgets. David is right. You're unwell. We need to get you help. Please, let me come over. Let me make you some tea. We can talk about this like rational people. You're not thinking clearly." I listened, a cold smile touching my lips. She was good. She was very good. The performance was seamless. If I didn't have the cold, hard data, I might have almost believed her. The fog was trying to roll back in, beckoned by her soothing, poisonous tone. I didn't respond. I just listened to the click and the return of the silence. I spent the next hour doing what any good engineer does after a system test. I reviewed the data. I listened to the recording of the evening's events, from the moment they arrived with the Chinese food to the moment the door closed behind David. I heard the clinking of plates, the casual, false cheer, the sudden tension when I placed the recorder on the table, the shocked gasps, the denials, the spluttering rage. It was all there. A perfect audio snapshot of a family imploding. Satisfied, I created 3 more copies. One for Esme, one for my safety deposit box, one to keep on my person. I was now a fortress of evidence. By midnight, the phone had stopped ringing. The silence was absolute. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt profoundly lonely. I walked through the quiet house, turning off lights. I paused at the foot of the stairs, looking up into the darkness of the second floor, where the bedrooms were. For decades, those rooms had been filled with the sounds of my family, children laughing, arguing, playing music too loud. The comforting weight of Eleanor's presence beside me in our bed. Now, it was just empty space. I didn't go upstairs. I couldn't face the emptiness of that bed. I went back to my office and pulled the old Afghan Eleanor had knitted from the closet. I settled into my desk chair, the Afghan around my shoulders, surrounded by the ghosts of my past and the digital proof of my present. I didn't sleep. I listened to the silence, and I planned for the next phase. The battle was won. The war was coming. The next morning, the sun streamed into my office, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I felt stiff, old, my bones creaking in protest from a night spent in a chair. But my mind was clear, sharpened by a night of vigilance and planning. I made coffee, the simple ritual grounding me. The house phone began ringing again, precisely 8:01 a.m. I ignored it. My cell phone lit up with a call from Mark. I sent it to voicemail. The text started soon after, a blizzard of them from David and Sarah, ranging from pleading to threatening. I focused on my task. I wrote a long, detailed email to Esme Wright, attaching the previous night's recording and giving her a summary of the confrontation. I ended it with, "Expect legal challenges. They are regrouping. Please proceed with filing the will with the probate court as discussed. The sooner it is a matter of public record, the better." Her reply was almost instantaneous. "Received. Well done, Mr. Bernstein. A difficult but necessary action. We are prepared. I will initiate filing today. Please instruct your family that all future communications regarding your estate are to go through this office." A wave of relief washed over me. I was not alone in this. I had a general, and she was on my side. Next, I called Linda. It was early in California, but she picked up on the first ring. "Dad. Oh my God, Dad. What is going on? My phone is blowing up. David is hysterical. He says you've had a psychotic break, that you've disinherited everyone based on some paranoid delusion about recordings. He says you're destroying the family." Her voice was high with panic and confusion. I took a deep breath. "Linda, honey, slow down. Take a breath. David is lying. I have not had a break. I am lucid. I am sane. And I have proof." I walked her through it. Not all of it. It was too much for a phone call, but the broad strokes. The initial gaslighting about the check. The gradual financial control. Sarah going through my files. My decision to gather evidence. The recordings of them planning the power of attorney and the asset transfers. The new will. The video. She was silent for a long time after I finished. I could hear her breathing, shallow and quick. "My God," she whispered finally. "All this time I thought he made it sound so convincing. He said you were forgetting everything, that you were vulnerable." "I know he did," I said, my voice soft. "And I let him. I had to. The video, the psychiatrists, it's all real. It's all real and legally airtight. Linda, I need you to listen to me. They are going to come after you. They will try to turn you against me. They will say I'm crazy, that have been manipulated. I am emailing you a file. It is a compilation of some of the clearest recordings. Listen to it. Listen to your brother and his wife plotting to take control of my life. Then call me back." "Okay, Dad," she said, her voice small. "Okay, I will." I sent the file. The wait was agonizing. I busied myself around the house, but my eyes were constantly drawn to the phone. An hour later, it rang. It was Linda. She was crying. "I heard it," she sobbed. "Oh, Dad, I heard them. How could they? How could they do that to you? The way they talked about you like you were a problem to be solved, a wallet to be emptied." Her rage was a mirror of my own. And it was a bomb. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. Someone else could see it. "I'm so sorry, Linda. I wanted to protect you from this. Don't you dare apologize," she said, her voice hardening through the tears. Those vultures. "I'm booking a flight. I'm coming out there. You shouldn't be alone." "No," I said, more sharply than I intended. "Not yet. The moment you arrive, they'll descend. It will become a circus. Right now, the legal process needs to play out. Esme, my lawyer, is filing the will today. Once it's in the court system, their options become much more limited. Stay put for now. Be my ally on the West Coast. She reluctantly agreed. We talked for another hour, me filling in more details, her cycling through grief, rage, and a fierce, protective love. By the end of the call, I felt like I had my daughter back. The fog had kept her from me, too. The doorbell rang just after noon. I wasn't expecting anyone. I peered through the side light. It was Mark, alone. He was shifting his weight from foot to foot, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, his head down. He looked like a scolded child. I hesitated. Mark was the follower, the peacemaker, had never had David's ambition or Sarah's cunning, had just gone along, too afraid of conflict to question the narrative. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face. The other part, the father part, felt a pang of pity. I opened the door. He flinched, as if expecting me to yell. "Pop," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Mark, can I come in?" I stepped back, letting him enter. He stood awkwardly in the foyer, looking around as if he'd never seen the place before. "I suppose David sent you," I said, closing the door. He nodded miserably. "Hayes on the warpath, Pop. Him and Sarah. They're talking to lawyers. They're saying the recordings are illegal, that you coerce them somehow. They're saying you're not competent." "And what do you say, Mark?" I asked, crossing my arms. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were full of a confused pain. "I don't know what to say. I heard the things on that recorder last night. It sounded bad, real bad, but Dad, they're saying it's edited, that it's out of context, that you've misunderstood." "Misunderstood," I repeated, my voice flat. "I misunderstood them planning to get Dr. Evans to declare me incompetent. I misunderstood them talking about moving my assets. What exactly is the context that makes that acceptable, Mark? Enlighten me." He winced. They said they were just worried, that they were talking about worst-case scenarios, that they were trying to protect you. "And the check for Chloe? Did I misunderstand that I wrote $50 instead of $500? He looked down at his shoes. "David said you did write 50, that you just remember it wrong." I felt the old frustration rising, but I choked it down. Arguing facts with Mark was like trying to nail jelly to a wall. He believed what was easiest to believe, what caused the least friction. "Why are you here, Mark?" "They want to make a deal," he blurted out. "They know you've changed the will. They're scared. If you just tear up the new one, go back to the old will, they'll drop everything. No lawsuits, no fighting. We can all just go back to normal." I stared at him, incredulous. "Go back to normal? You mean go back to them treating me like a dementia patient while they pick my pockets? That's their offer. Capitulate, and they'll graciously stop trying to steal from me." "It's not like that, Pop," he pleaded. "It's family. We're supposed to stick together. Family doesn't do this, Mark," I said, my voice rising for the first time. "Family doesn't lie and manipulate and conspire. I am sticking together with the idea of family, the one that's based on trust and respect, not this rotten facsimile David and Sarah have built." He looked shocked by my outburst. It'd always been the quiet, steady father, the one who didn't raise his voice. "So that's it," he whispered. "You're just going to cut us all out." "I have not cut you out, Mark," I said, my voice weary. "The new will provides for you exactly as the old one did. You get the same share. The only people who are cut out are the ones whose actions demanded it. Your brother's share is reduced to a pittance. Sarah gets a single dollar. Those are the consequences of their behavior, not some arbitrary punishment. They did this to themselves." But the lawsuits, it's going to tear us apart." "Mark," I said softly, "look at me. We are already torn apart. The tearing happened slowly, over years, in whispered conversations and stolen glances and lies told for my own good. What happened last night was just me holding up the two pieces and showing everyone the ragged edge. The damage was already done." He had no answer for that. He just stood there, a big, sad man lost in a storm he didn't create and didn't know how to navigate. "You should go," I said, Tell David and Sarah that my lawyer's information is on its way to them. All communications should go through her. He nodded, defeated, and turned to leave. At the door, he paused. Pop, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Then he was gone. I leaned against the closed door, breathing heavily. The encounter had drained me. Dealing with Mark's passive complicity was somehow more exhausting than dealing with David's active malice. The rest of the day passed in a strange, tense limbo. The phone calls stopped. The text ceased. It was the quiet before the storm. They had received Esn's contact information. They were now talking to their own lawyers, being told the cold, hard facts. That one-party consent recordings were admissible. That independent psychiatric evaluations were a formidable barrier to any competency challenge. That fighting this would be long, ugly, expensive, and most likely futile. I knew they wouldn't give up easily. People like David and Sarah never do. But the first, most brutal assault was over. The battle lines were drawn. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I cooked a proper meal for myself. A steak, a baked potato, some peas. I set the table in the dining room. I even lit a candle. I sat at the head of the table, in the silence, and I ate. It was an act of defiance. A declaration that I was still here, still capable, still living my life on my own terms. After dinner, I went out into the garden. The evening air was cool and sweet. Eleanor's roses were in full bloom, their perfume a beautiful ghost in the twilight. I walked to the compost pile in the far corner, behind the old shed. I pushed aside a few rotting tomato vines and dug down with my hands until my fingers brushed against the smooth, waterproof case. I didn't open it. I just needed to know it was there. My buried truth. I looked back at the house. Lights were on in the windows. It looked warm, inviting. A home. But it didn't feel like one anymore. It felt like a fortress, a repository of secrets and evidence, a monument to a broken family. I had won my freedom. I had secured my legacy. I had proven my lucidity to the world and to myself. But as I stood there in the gathering dark, the scent of roses and decay filling the air, I understood the cost. The fog had lifted, but the landscape it revealed was scarred and barren. I was alone in it, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the silence I had fought so hard to win would be the heaviest burden I would ever have to carry. The war was over. I was the victor, and the victory felt hollow, and vast, and endlessly, terribly quiet. The silence after Mark left was different. It wasn't the shocked, reverberating quiet of the night before. This was a settled silence, a waiting silence. The dust had been kicked up, and now it was drifting back down, each particle finding a new, permanent place to land. The landscape of my life had been irrevocably altered, and the new terrain was stark and unfamiliar. I spent the next few days in a state of heightened alert, a soldier waiting for the next artillery barrage. But the phone didn't ring. No one came to the door. The text stopped. It was the most unnerving development yet. David wasn't one for quiet contemplation. Sarah's specialty was the persistent, nagging campaign. Their silence could only mean one thing. They were consulting lawyers. They were being advised, and that advice was likely to stop the direct, emotional appeals and start the cold, legal process. Esme Wright confirmed it with a brief, efficient email. Counsel for David and Sarah Bernstein has made contact. They are requesting a copy of the video affidavit and the psychiatric evaluations prior to any discussion. Standard fishing expedition. Instructions. My response was just as brief. Deny. They get nothing until they formally state their grounds for a challenge. Force their hand. I could almost see her tight, approving smile from 60 miles away. Agreed. Will respond accordingly. The waiting was agony. I was a man who built things, who solved problems. Passivity was a form of torture. I cleaned the house from top to bottom. The physical labor a poor substitute for mental action. I sorted through old boxes in the basement, finding relics of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else, My engineering schematics, Eleanor's teaching plans, crayon drawings from when the kids were small. Each artifact was a tiny, sharp stab of loss. I wasn't just fighting for my money, was fighting for the truth of my own history, which they had tried to rewrite. And in doing so, I was burning down the shared history we had all built together. A week after the confrontation, a formal, cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail. It was addressed to me from the law offices of Crestview and Stern. I took it to my office, slit it open with my letter opener, and read the contents with a cold, detached calm. It was a letter, dense with legalese, but the essence was clear. On behalf of David and Sarah Bernstein, they were formally contesting the validity of my new last will and testament on the grounds of undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. They alleged that I was not of sound mind when the will was executed, and that I had been manipulated by an unnamed third party, likely a reference to Esme, or perhaps some imaginary sinister figure they'd concocted. They demanded a full medical evaluation by a geriatric psychiatrist of their choosing, and the immediate production of all so-called recordings for authentication and analysis. It was all bullshit, a bluff, a shot across the bow designed to scare me into backing down. They wanted to drag me into a costly, protracted legal battle, betting that an 81-year-old man wouldn't have the stamina or the funds to fight it. They had bet wrong. I scanned the letter and emailed it to Esme. Her response came within the hour. Predictable. Do not respond. We will acknowledge receipts and file a motion for summary judgment. The psychiatric reports are rock solid. This will not get to a trial. They are hoping for a settlement. A settlement. They wanted to negotiate, to barter for a larger piece of the pie they felt entitled to. The arrogance of it took my breath away. They had tried to steal my mind, my autonomy, and my fortune, and now they wanted to meet in the middle. No settlement, I typed back, my fingers striking the keys with firm finality. Not a dime. They get what the will stipulates, nothing more. They can spend their intended inheritance on legal fees if they choose. Understood, Esme replied. Hold fast, Mr. Bernstein. I held fast. The days turned into a week, then two. The legal machinery ground on, silent and invisible to me. I was the client, the prize, the contested territory. I received updates from Esme. Dry emails detailing motions filed, responses received. The language was bloodless, petition, discovery, affidavit. But behind each word, I could feel the fury and desperation of my son and his wife. The isolation was the hardest part. The house was a museum of a life that was over. I missed the noise. I even missed the condescension, because it was at least a form of contact. Now, there was nothing. I thought about Chloe's text. I wanted to reach out, to explain, to make sure she and Jake were okay. But I knew any contact would be used against me. It would be twisted, misinterpreted, fed into their narrative of my instability. My love for my grandchildren had become a vulnerability, and I had to quarantine it. One afternoon, I found myself standing in front of the hall mirror. I looked old. The events of the past months had carved new lines into my face. My eyes, though clear, were shadowed with a deep weariness. But they were my eyes. They were present. They were seeing. 4 years, I had looked into this mirror and seen the man they told me I was, confused, fading, a ghost in his own home. Now, I saw the man who had engineered their downfall. It was a colder, harder face, a face that had chosen truth over peace, justice over harmony. I wasn't sure if I liked the man staring back at me, but I respected him. The break in the stalemate came from an unexpected direction. It was a Thursday. Rain lashed against the windows, drumming a monotonous rhythm on the roof. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Esme always called first. I peered through the side light. My breath caught in my throat. It was Dr. Evans. He stood on my porch, his coat collar turned up against the rain, his expression grim and deeply uncomfortable. He held no briefcase. This wasn't a professional visit. Cautiously, I opened the door. "Dr. Barry," he said, nodding. Water dripped from his rain-spotted glasses. "May I come in?" I won't take much of your time. I stepped back, allowing him entry. He wiped his feet carefully on the mat, a fastidious habit that seemed absurd given the circumstances. He followed me into the living room, but didn't sit down. "I'll get right to the point," he said, his voice low and earnest. "I've been served with a subpoena from David's lawyers. They want my medical records. They want me to testify about your mental state, about our conversation regarding the power of attorney." I said nothing. I just watched him. He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "Barry, I need you to understand the position this puts me in. What I did, what I agreed to do for Sarah, it was a misjudgment, a serious one. I allowed a familial concern to override my professional ethics." She presented a picture of your decline that seemed plausible. It noticed little things, forgetfulness, the stories they told, I repeated, my voice flat. "I should have spoken to you directly," he admitted, the words seeming to cost him a great effort. "I should have conducted my own assessment, independent of their influence. I didn't. I failed you as your physician." The apology hung in the air between us. It was real. I could see the shame on his face. He wasn't a villain, he was a weak man who had been skillfully manipulated. Another casualty of their campaign. "What do you want from me, doctor?" I asked. "I want to avoid testifying," he said bluntly. "If I take the stand, I will have to admit that I was prepared to declare you incompetent based on second-hand information. That is a career-ending admission. My counsel advises me to settle with you. I am willing to provide a full, notarized affidavit stating that, upon reflection and review of the evidence, you have the recordings, the independent psychiatric reports. I believe I was misled by your family, that I have no reason to doubt your testamentary capacity, that the power of attorney was obtained under false pretenses. In exchange, you would not compel my testimony. My records would remain private." I stared at him. He was offering me a gift. The family doctor, the one they had counted on as their star witness, was ready to defect, to capitulate completely. His testimony would have been a nuisance, a messy sideshow, but his affidavit would be a dagger right through the heart of their case. "You're asking me to make a deal," I said. "I am asking you for mercy," he corrected softly. "I was wrong. I am trying to make it right. This is the only way I know how." I thought about it. I thought about making him sweat, making him testify, watching him squirm on the stand under Esm's sharp questioning. The vengeful part of me liked that idea, but the engineer saw the more elegant solution, the clean, efficient solution. "I'll need to discuss it with my lawyer," I said, "but if your affidavit is as comprehensive as you say, I am inclined to accept." The relief on his face was palpable. "Thank you, Barry. Thank you." He left quickly, as if afraid I might change my mind. I stood in the living room, listening to the rain, a slow smile spreading across my face. Their own weapon had just turned against them. It was a beautiful piece of tactical sabotage. I called Esme. She was silent for a long moment after I explained the situation. "Well," she said finally, a note of awe in her usually clipped tone, "I have to say, Mr. Bernstein, you were full of surprises. This is extraordinary. It eviscerates their position on the competency issue. They have no witness now. They have nothing. So it's over. It's not over until they drop their suit," she cautioned. "But this is a catastrophic blow for them. They'll draw up the agreement for Dr. Evans immediately. Once we have his affidavit, we will forward it to Crestview and Stern. I expect we'll be hearing from them very soon after that." She was right. 2 days later, an email arrived from Esme with the subject line, "Offer of settlement." My heart hammered as I opened it. It was forwarded from David and Sarah's lawyers. The language was still formal, but the tone was entirely different. Gone were the accusations of undue influence. Gone was the demand for a new psychiatric evaluation. Instead, they offered to drop their legal challenge to the will in its entirety. No further contests, no appeals. In exchange, they asked that I not pursue any civil or criminal charges against them for their attempt to obtain the power of attorney, something Esme had hinted was a possibility, though a remote one. They also, almost as an afterthought, requested that the family heal and that I consider re-establishing lines of communication. It was a surrender, a full, unconditional surrender, dressed up in legal finery to save face. I read it twice, then a third time. I felt no thrill of victory, no surge of triumph, just a vast, hollow emptiness. This was the end of the road. The battle was won. The war was over. I typed my reply to Esme: accept their terms on the condition that the dismissal of their challenge is with prejudice, meaning they can never file again. I will not pursue legal action against them. The matter of communication is not a legal issue and is not up for negotiation. It is my decision alone. Well done, Mr. Bernstein, she wrote back. I'll prepare the dismissal paperwork. And just like that, it was finished. The following weeks were a study in anticlimax. The signed dismissal papers were filed with the court. My new will stood unchallenged. The silence from David and Sarah became permanent. They had lost, and they had no place left in my life. Mark sent one final, awkward text, a kind of farewell. It read, I'm sorry for everything, Pop. I hope you find some peace. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Linda flew out for a visit. Having her in the house was a bomb. We didn't talk much about the case. Instead, we talked about Eleanor. We looked at old photos. We cooked together. She tried to fill the silence with her presence, and for a little while, it worked. She tried to broach the subject of reconciliation, of maybe one day talking to David again. He's still my brother, Dad, she said one evening over wine. I know, I said, and you can have whatever relationship with him you want, but he is no longer my son. That bridge is burned. I won't be rebuilding it. She accepted that, though it saddened her. Her visit was a temporary bridge over the chasm of my solitude, but when she left, the chasm was still there, wider and deeper than before. The seasons changed. Fall gave way to winter. The first snow fell, blanketing Eleanor's garden in a pristine, silent white. I became a creature of routine. I read. I listened to music. I took walks. I was the master of my own house, my own mind, my own fortune. I was free, and I was lonelier than I had ever been in my life. One crisp, bright morning in December, I received a letter. It wasn't a legal document. It was a simple, handwritten card. The return address was Chloe's college. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Dear Grandpa, I know I'm probably not supposed to be writing to you. Mom and Dad would have a fit, but I've been thinking a lot about everything. It's taken me this long to sort it all out in my head. I listened to the recording you sent Aunt Linda. She let me hear it. I heard it all, really heard it, and I finally understood. What they did was wrong. It was cruel, and you were right to stop them. It must have taken so much courage to do what you did, all alone. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I know the will says I don't get anything until I'm 30, and I think that's smart. I'm still just a kid, figuring things out. But I wanted you to know that I see you. I see the man you really are, not the confused grandpa they talked about, but the strong, smart, brave one who fought back. I miss you. I miss our talks. I hope maybe, one day, when things aren't so raw, we can have one again. Love always, your granddaughter, Chloe P.S. I'm switching my major to engineering. Thought you'd like that. I read the letter 3 times. Then I sat down at the kitchen table, the sun streaming through the window, and I wept. I wept for the loss, for the pain, for the years of deception. But I also wept with a profound, staggering sense of relief. It was the first unconditional, clear-eyed acknowledgement of my truth from anyone in my family. It was an absolution. She saw me. She understood. I held the card to my chest, the paper warm from my hand. The house was still silent, but the silence felt different now. It wasn't an emptiness. It was a space, a clean, well-lighted space where the truth could finally live, unedited and unchallenged. I had gone to war with my family to prove I was lucid. I had used their own weapons of deception against them, and I had won. I had secured my legacy, not just of money, but of mind. I had preserved my story. The cost had been everything else, but as I sat there, holding my granddaughter's words, I knew it had not been for nothing. The truth, once buried, had finally been excavated. It was a scarred and battered thing, But it was mine, and it was real. I was Barry Bernstein. I was 81 years old. I was of sound mind, and I was, at long last, at peace.